Welcome, this isn't just an English story. It's a story about becoming a better English learner. Today's story is for anyone who wants to speak English more fluently. Maybe you know a lot of English words. Maybe you understand English very well. But when you start speaking, every sentence feels slow. You stop, you search for words, you translate in your head, and speaking never feels natural. In today's story, David discovers why some people sound fluent without using difficult English. As you listen, try to notice what changes him. You may discover the same secret can help you too. Now, let's begin. David had a new coworker named Mike. Every morning, people stopped by Mike's desk. They talked about work, they talked about their weekend, they laughed. The conversations always sounded easy. One morning, David listened carefully. Mike didn't use difficult words. He didn't speak very fast. He simply answered without stopping. Sounds good. I'll take a look. It depends. That's a good idea. The words came naturally. David couldn't understand it. I know all of those words, he thought. So why don't I sound like that? On his way back to his desk, he made a decision. If I learn more words, maybe I'll become fluent too. David believed he knew the answer. He needed more words, so he started studying every day. He learned 20 new words every morning. He wrote them in a notebook. He reviewed them every night. Week after week, his vocabulary grew. Reading became easier. Listening became easier. David smiled. This is working, he thought, but every time someone started a conversation, the same thing happened. He stopped. He searched for words. He tried to build the perfect sentence. The silence grew longer. Then someone else started talking. The conversation moved on without him. One afternoon, David closed his notebook and sighed. I know more words now, so why don't I sound more fluent? Few days later, David sat with Mike during lunch. He decided to pay attention, not to Mike's pronunciation, not to his grammar, but to the words he used. Mike answered a phone call. I'll call you back. A few minutes later, someone asked about a meeting. No problem. We can do it tomorrow. Then another coworker walked over. By the way, I need your help with something. Later that afternoon, David heard Mike say, it depends. Let's see. Sounds good. David frowned. None of those expressions were difficult. In fact, he had learned every single word years ago. So why did Mike sound so fluent? That question stayed in David's mind all day. The next day, David told his teacher what he had noticed. Mike doesn't use difficult English. He uses simple words. But somehow, he sounds much more fluent than I do. His teacher smiled. That's because Mike isn't speaking one word at a time. David looked confused. What do you mean? The teacher picked up a pen. When you speak, you build your sentences one word at a time. You choose a word, then another, and another. It takes time. Then the teacher wrote 4 expressions on a piece of paper. By the way, sounds good. It depends. I'll take a look. Mike doesn't build these expressions. He already knows them. He uses them as one idea, just like one word. David looked at the paper again. For the first time, he wasn't looking at 4 different words. He was looking at one complete expression. The teacher smiled. Fluent speakers don't build every sentence. They reuse familiar expressions. David finally understood. Maybe fluency wasn't about learning more words. Maybe it was about using the words he already knew together. The teacher gave David a different challenge. For 1 week, stop memorizing new words. David looked surprised. No new words, the teacher smiled. No, learn 5 useful expressions instead. Use the same ones every day. The teacher wrote them down. By the way, it depends. Sounds good. I'll take a look. No problem. Don't just read them. Use them. Again and again, in real conversations. And even when you're alone, that evening, David started practicing. He said each expression out loud, again and again, sometimes while making coffee, sometimes on his way to work, sometimes before going to bed. At first it felt strange, but after a few days, the expressions came out more easily. He didn't need to think about every word anymore, he simply said them. A week later, David noticed something different. His conversations felt smoother, not because he had learned hundreds of new words and not because he was speaking faster. He simply stopped pausing as often. His teacher smiled. Do you know why this works? David shook his head. When you learn single words, you still have to build a sentence. But when you learn familiar expressions, part of the sentence is already finished. You don't have to create it. You simply use it. The teacher pointed to the list again. When you say, by the way, you aren't choosing 3 words. You're using one familiar expression. The same is true for it depends and sounds good. The more familiar these expressions become, the less you need to think. David nodded. Now he understood why Mike sounded so natural. He wasn't creating every sentence from the beginning. He was putting familiar expressions together for the first time. But Fluent English didn't seem like a talent. It looked like a habit. The following Monday, David walked into the office with a little more confidence. As he sat down, Mike smiled. "Good morning." "Good morning," David replied. A few minutes later, Mike looked over. "Do you have time to help me this afternoon?" David smiled. "Sure, no problem." Mike nodded. "By the way, did you finish the report? I'll take a look after lunch." "Sounds good," Mike said. The conversation continued. David didn't stop to search for every word. He didn't try to build every sentence from the beginning. The familiar expressions came first. The rest of the sentence followed naturally. For the first time, speaking English didn't feel like solving a puzzle. It felt like having a conversation. As David walked back to his desk, he smiled. He finally understood why Mike had always sounded so fluent. It wasn't because Mike knew more English. It was because Mike had practiced the expressions he used every day. David never stopped learning new words, but he stopped believing that more words would make him fluent. Instead, he practiced the expressions he could use every day. Little by little, speaking became easier, not because his English was perfect, but because it was familiar. If you want to speak English more fluently, don't ask yourself, what new words should I learn today? Ask yourself, what useful expression can I use today? And because Fluent English isn't built one word at a time, it's built one familiar expression at a time. And the more familiar those expressions become, the more natural your English will sound.